The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Confederation stretched wider than 3 football fields. Curved walls rose hundreds of feet high, their surfaces flickering with holographic displays showing thousands of worlds across the galaxy. 700 different alien species had representatives in attendance today, their varied breathing apparatuses creating a strange symphony of hisses, clicks, and whirs that echoed throughout the massive space. At the center of this imposing chamber stood a single human. Jack Reed adjusted his simple gray suit and straightened his back. The Earth diplomat showed no external sign of fear despite being the first human to ever address the Galactic Council, the most powerful governing body in known space. 700 pairs of eyes, optical sensors, and sensory organs watched his every movement. Ambassador Reed, rumbled the council leader, a massive 12-foot creature with iridescent scales and 6 upper limbs. You stand before this assembly as the representative of Earth, a world we only discovered existed 18 standard months ago. Yet in that brief time, your species has caused more disruption than any civilization in the last 1,000 cycles. Jack nodded once, acknowledging the statement without accepting its negative implications. The small gesture caused murmurs to ripple through the assembled representatives. They weren't used to such subtle defiance. The council has summoned you to explain your species' actions, continued the leader, leaning forward. Specifically, your unauthorized interference. With the Bellatrix conflict projected, images appeared above the chamber, recordings of human ships, delivering supplies and evacuating civilians. From a war-torn planet at the edge of Cygnus sector, the operations had clearly been conducted with impressive efficiency. 3 million lives saved, Jack stated calmly. With respect, we didn't see that as interference. We saw it as obligation. The leader's scales flashed bright red, a sign of agitation that Jack had been briefed to recognize. The Bellatrix conflict was carefully monitored by council observers. The situation was proceeding according to natural development patterns. Your intervention disrupted centuries of established diplomatic protocol. Jack took a slow breath. This was the moment he'd been preparing for since being selected for this mission. Everything Earth's future in galactic society might depend on what he said next. Council leader, honored representatives, he began, his voice clear and unwavering. I have studied your protocols extensively. I understand that the Confederation has built its stability on principles of non-intervention and natural development. I respect that these policies have maintained peace among your member worlds for thousands of years. The leader's scales settled slightly, returning to a more neutral blue. Jack had shown proper deference, a good start. However, Jack continued, I must point out that nowhere in your founding charter does it state that mass suffering must be ignored when it can be prevented. Nowhere does it mandate that we must watch children die when we have the means to save them. Angry chittering erupted from several sections of the chamber. A tall, spindly representative with translucent skin rose from her seat. The human speaks of children to manipulate our emotions. This is precisely why their kind cannot be trusted with galactic responsibilities. Jack turned toward her, unruffled. With respect, Representative Vroon, I speak of children because they were there. Because they were dying. Because that matters. Your species has no understanding of the delicate balance we maintain, shouted another delegate. A hovering mass of tentacles and sensory nodes. The Bellatrix conflict would have resolved naturally in another 15 cycles. The stronger civilization would have prevailed as is proper. 15 cycles, Jack repeated quietly. That's approximately 43 Earth years. Another 2 generations of suffering. Another 1,000,000 deaths. All in service of, what? A theory that natural selection should apply to entire civilizations? The council leader slammed a massive limb down on the podium. Ambassador Reed, you will maintain proper decorum in these chambers? Jack bowed his head slightly. My apologies for my tone, council leader, but I cannot apologize for the substance of my words, or for the actions of my people. He turned slowly, meeting the gaze of as many representatives as possible. We understand we are newcomers to your galactic community. We have much to learn about your ways, but you also have something to learn about ours. Jack reached into his pocket. Immediately, security drones descended from hidden compartments in the ceiling. Weapons trained on the human. He froze, then slowly removed his hand to reveal a small data crystal. This contains accounts from the children we evacuated from Bellatrix for, he said quietly. Their words, their experiences, their gratitude. I invite any representative who questions our actions to review this material. Then tell me we should have left them to die in the name of non-interference. The council leader gestured and a drone collected the crystal. Your emotional appeals have no place in rational governance, human. The council does not make decisions based on individual suffering, but on the greater stability of galactic civilization. Jack nodded. I understand. And I respectfully suggest that any civilization that ignores individual suffering cannot truly claim stability. Only the illusion of it. A deep silence fell over the chamber. Such direct challenge to council philosophy was unprecedented. The leader's scale shifted to a deep purple. You would lecture us on governance? Your species still fights wars on your own planet. You have achieved faster than light travel only within the last century. You are infants in cosmic terms. Yes, Jack agreed simply. We are young. We make mistakes. We struggle and fight and sometimes fail spectacularly. But we learn, we adapt, we grow, and most importantly, we help each other when we can. He straightened to his full height. That is not a weakness to be overcome, council leader. It is the core of who we are. From the upper tier of the chamber, a representative encased in a crystalline structure spoke for the first time, their voice resonating like struck glass. The human speaks an uncomfortable truth. Our non-interference policies were designed to prevent imperial conquest, not to justify inaction in the face of humanitarian crises. Several other representatives nodded in agreement, creating the first visible division in the council's response. The leader's scales rippled through several colors before settling on a muted blue. Ambassador Reed, the council will require time to deliberate on Earth's actions and your perspective. You will be summoned when we have reached our decision. Jack bowed respectfully. Thank you, council leader. Earth awaits your wisdom, but while you deliberate, I hope you will consider one final thought. You presume much, human, the leader rumbled. Perhaps, Jack acknowledged, but consider this. In the 18 months since discovering your confederation, we have studied your histories extensively. We know that 3 previous galactic civilizations rose and fell before yours. Each time, the records suggest they collapsed not from external threats, but from internal stagnation. From an inability to adapt to new challenges. Jack gestured to the chamber around them. Your confederation has built something remarkable. Peace and stability across thousands of worlds. But stability without compassion, without growth, without the occasional disruption of comfortable patterns, that's not civilization. That's just waiting for entropy to win. The council leader stared at Jack with unreadable alien eyes. You will be escorted to the diplomatic quarters. This session is concluded. As Jack was led from the chamber, whispered conversations erupted throughout the council. For the first time in centuries, the representatives found themselves genuinely unsettled, not by threats or shows of force, but by something far more disruptive. The simple human insistence that things could be better than they were. In the diplomatic quarters, Jack looked out at the stars through a massive viewport. The fate of Earth's relationship with the galactic community hung in the balance. Yet somehow he felt a strange sense of hope. Because if there was one thing humans had always been good at, it was challenging the status quo. And sometimes that was exactly what the universe needed. The waiting was the hardest part. Jack paced the elegant confines of the diplomatic quarters, watching distant stars through the massive curved viewport. 3 days had passed since his appearance before the Galactic Council. 3 days with no word on Earth's fate. A soft chime announced a visitor. The door slid open to reveal Talus, a tall, blue-skinned alien who served as Jack's liaison to the council. Ambassador Reed, Talus said, her translator converting her musical language to English. The council has requested your presence. Jack straightened his jacket. Have they reached a decision? It is. Complicated, Talus replied, her large eyes blinking rapidly. There has been significant debate. Your words caused quite the disruption. That could be good or very, very bad. Jack followed Talus through the sweeping corridors of the massive space station that served as the Confederation's headquarters. Other aliens stepped aside, watching the human with mixtures of curiosity, hostility, and something Jack couldn't quite identify. Is that him? The human? Whispered voices as they passed. The one who challenged the council directly. They say his species still fights wars among themselves. I heard they save even non-sentient creatures on their world. Jack, kept his face neutral despite the attention. Earth's intelligence services had warned him that humans would be objects of intense curiosity. Humanity was the newest species to achieve faster-than-light travel in over 2 centuries, and their rapid technological advancement had alarmed many in the galactic community. They arrived at a smaller chamber, not the Grand Council room from before. 12 representatives sat in a semicircle. The High Council, the most powerful members who made decisions when the full assembly couldn't reach consensus. The council leader's scales shimmered with blue and gold patterns as Jack entered. "Ambassador Reed, please be seated." Jack took the offered chair, noting it had been adjusted for human physiology, a small courtesy he hadn't expected. "Your address to the council has created an unprecedented situation," the leader began. "In 14,000 cycles, no representative has ever questioned our non-interference directives so directly." "I meant no disrespect," Jack said carefully. "Earth simply has different perspectives on these matters." The crystalline entity who had supported Jack previously chimed in, their form glowing softly. "Different indeed. We have studied your species extensively since your appearance in galactic affairs. Humans appear to have a biological imperative to assist others, even at significant cost to yourselves. This is unusual. We call it compassion," Jack explained, "or empathy." "Most species evolve beyond such inefficient responses," said another council member, a being composed of shifting gases contained within an environmental suit. "Early empathy serves reproductive success in pack species, but advanced civilizations typically redirect such impulses toward their own kind only." Jack leaned forward. "With respect, we don't view compassion as something to evolve beyond. We see it as something to extend further." The council leader's scales flickered rapidly. "This perspective has made your decision regarding Earth extremely difficult. Some view your species as dangerously disruptive. Others find your idealism refreshing." "And what does the leader believe?" Jack asked. The massive alien regarded Jack with multifaceted eyes. "I believe you are either the greatest threat or the greatest opportunity the Confederation has faced in millennia." "Perhaps both." A tense silence filled the chamber. The leader continued, "Before we render our decision, we must understand something fundamental about humanity. Your actions at Bellatrix saved millions, yes, but they directly violated our most sacred principle of non-interference. How does Earth justify this contradiction?" Jack considered his words carefully. Everything could depend on his answer. "On Earth, we have a concept called the bystander effect," he began. "It describes how individuals will observe an emergency but fail to help, each assuming someone else will take responsibility. Throughout our history, we've learned this tendency leads to great suffering." He looked around the chamber, meeting each alien gaze. "We've made countless mistakes. We've waged wars over resources, ideology, and misunderstandings. But one lesson we've learned, written in the blood of millions, is this: when you have the power to help and you choose not to act, you bear responsibility for what follows." The crystalline entity pulsed brighter. "By your logic, the entire Confederation bears responsibility for every death in the Bellatrix conflict. I wouldn't presume to judge your ethics," Jack replied diplomatically. "I only explain ours." A new voice spoke. A small, ancient-looking being with wrinkled gray skin and enormous eyes. Jack recognized Valar, representative of the Morrigan Synapse, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. "There is something none here have mentioned," Valar said, voice barely above a whisper yet somehow filling the chamber. "Something in our oldest records." The council leader's scales darkened. "Elder Valar, those archives are sealed by your own directive. Times change. Perhaps we must as well." The ancient alien turned toward Jack. "Human, your species reminds us of another that existed long ago, before the Confederation. They too acted on what you call compassion, extending aid across boundaries without calculation of benefit." Jack leaned forward. "What happened to them?" "They saved many worlds from destruction. Then they vanished. Our records are unclear why." Valar's enormous eyes fixed on Jack. "But before they disappeared, they left a warning. Beware the comfort of stability when it becomes an excuse for indifference." Murmurs spread through the High Council. The leader's scales flashed urgent patterns. "Enough," the leader commanded. "We must render our decision regarding Earth." Jack held his breath. "The High Council has determined that humanity's actions at Bellatrix, while well-intentioned, violated our most fundamental principles, the leader stated formally. However, we also recognize that your intervention saved millions of lives that would have been lost under our traditional non-interference policy. Jack waited, sensing there was more. Therefore, Earth will not be sanctioned for the Bellatrix incident. But nor will you be granted full membership in the Confederation at this time. Jack frowned. What does that mean for Earth? It means, the crystalline entity explained, that you will be given observer status. You may establish diplomatic relations, engage in limited trade, but not vote in council matters or participate in Confederation defense initiatives. Not ideal, but better than Jack had feared. And our humanitarian operations? The council leader's scales rippled. That is where we have reached a unique compromise. The council proposes the formation of a new division within our structure, the Humanitarian Response Initiative. This body would assess crises throughout the galaxy and coordinate relief efforts where appropriate. Jack's eyes widened in surprise. That's a significant change to Confederation policy. Indeed, the leader acknowledged. And we propose that Earth lead this initiative under Confederation oversight. Your species seems uniquely qualified and motivated for such work. Jack could hardly believe what he was hearing. Not only had Earth avoided sanctions, but they were being offered a role that could fundamentally change how the galaxy responded to suffering. This is generous, Jack said carefully, but I sense there's a catch. The leader's scales shifted to a deep purple. Perceptive. There is a condition. The initiative must operate by strict guidelines. No interference in established conflicts without full council approval. No technology transfers to developing worlds. No undermining of local governance structures. Jack considered this. The restrictions were significant, but the opportunity was unprecedented. I will need to consult with my government, he said finally. But speaking personally, I believe we could work within these parameters. There is one more thing you should know, Valar said softly. The council did not reach this decision easily. Many opposed any accommodation of human values. What changed their minds? Jack asked. The ancient alien's eyes seemed to look through Jack rather than at him. I shared with them certain sealed records, information about threats approaching from beyond our known space. Threats that will require unconventional responses. Jack felt a chill. What kind of threats? That information remains classified, the council leader interjected. For now, know only that the Confederation values diversity of approach more than it perhaps has shown. Your species' unusual perspectives may prove useful. The meeting concluded shortly after, and Jack found himself back in the diplomatic quarters with much to report to Earth. As he prepared his communication, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was much more happening than a simple policy debate. Outside his viewport, the massive space station orbited a neutron star, drawing power from its radiation. Thousands of ships came and went, representatives of a galactic civilization that had maintained peace for 14 millennia. And they were afraid of something. Jack thought about Valar's words about ancient threats and vanished civilizations, about the leader's comment that humans might be both opportunity and danger, about the whispers that followed him through the corridors. Whatever was coming, humanity had just been given a seat at the table, albeit a small one. And Jack read, 6 months had passed since Earth joined the Galactic Confederation as the leader of the newly formed Humanitarian Response Initiative. In that time, human teams had responded to 3 major crises across the galaxy: a plague on Deneb 7, flooding on the moons of Proxima, and a volcanic eruption that threatened to destroy the underground civilization of Tau Ceti. Each mission had been completed successfully, but not without controversy. Jack stood in the observation deck of the Earth Embassy, looking out at the spectacular view of the Confederation headquarters, a massive structure that resembled a gleaming silver flower, with thousands of lights marking windows, docking bays, and navigation beacons. Ambassador Reed had aged visibly in the past half-year, new lines etched around his eyes from the constant diplomatic pressure. "They're calling an emergency council session," said a voice behind him. Jack turned to see Maria Donovan, his chief of staff, holding a data pad with a grim expression. Like Jack, Maria had been working non-stop since their arrival, coordinating between Earth government and the Byzantine bureaucracy of the Confederation. "Let me guess," Jack sighed. The Tau Ceti mission? Maria nodded. Apparently we overstepped by introducing water filtration technology to the survivors. The Oversight Committee is claiming it violates the technology transfer restrictions. Jack rubbed his temples. We provided clean water to 30 million refugees. Their existing filtration systems were destroyed in the eruption. I know that, you know that. But the Rigelians are claiming we should have let them develop their own solution, Maria replied, frustration clear in her voice. They're leading the charge against us again. The Rigelian Empire had emerged as humanity's most vocal opponent in the Confederation. A species of logical, cold-blooded thinkers, they viewed human emotionality as dangerous and unpredictable. When's the session? Jack asked. 2 hours, but that's not all. Maria handed him the data pad. Elder Wheeler has requested a private meeting beforehand. Jack raised an eyebrow in surprise. The ancient representative of the Morrigan Synapse rarely granted private audiences. Did he say why? Only that it concerns matters beyond the current dispute. 90 minutes later, Jack found himself in a dimly lit chamber deep within the Confederation headquarters. The room was filled with swirling mist that seemed to glow from within, the preferred environment of the Morrigans, whose physiology required high humidity and low light. Elder Wheeler sat on a simple platform, his small gray form nearly lost in the mist. Though physically unimposing, the ancient alien carried an aura of immense wisdom and authority that Jack had felt from their first meeting. Ambassador Reed, Wheeler greeted him, voice soft yet penetrating. Thank you for coming. Jack bowed slightly, following the protocol he'd been taught for addressing elder species. The honor is mine, Elder. How may Earth assist the Morrigan Synapse? Wheeler's enormous eyes regarded Jack for a long moment. It is not assistance I require, but understanding. Please sit. Jack lowered himself onto a cushion opposite the elder. You wonder why the Confederation continues to resist your humanitarian efforts despite their obvious benefits, Wheeler stated. The thought has crossed my mind, Jack admitted. We've saved millions of lives without imposing our values or governance. Yet every mission is met with suspicion and opposition. Wheeler nodded slowly. What you perceive as resistance to good works is actually fear. Deep instinctive fear. Fear of humans? Jack asked, incredulous. We're technologically behind most Confederation species. We pose no military threat. It is not your weapons they fear, Ambassador. Wheeler's eyes seemed to glow in the mist. It is your nature. The elder raised a thin hand, and the mist around them formed into shapes, holographic representations of various alien species Jack recognized from the Council. Every species in the Confederation evolved through competition, Wheeler explained. Their ancestors survived by defeating rivals, securing resources, protecting territory. This competitive instinct remains, merely channeled into politics, economics, and status. The mist shifted to show various human activities, medical teams treating aliens, engineers building shelters, diplomats negotiating peace agreements. Humans compete too, Jack pointed out. We've had our share of wars and conflicts. Yes, Wheeler acknowledged. But you also do this. The mist showed new images. Humans risking their lives to save strangers, sharing resources during disasters, cooperating across boundaries of nation, race, and ideology. Most species help their own kind, Wheeler continued. Many form alliances of mutual benefit. But humans regularly extend themselves for others with no expectation of return. You call it altruism. The Confederation calls it evolutionary madness, Jack frowned. Surely we're not the only species capable of compassion. Compassion, yes. Unprompted sacrifice for unrelated beings? Extremely rare. Wheeler leaned forward. The Confederation fears what it cannot predict or control. Your actions follow patterns they cannot understand because your values violate their fundamental assumptions about intelligent behavior. Jack considered this. So when we provide water filtration to the Tau Cetians, the Rigelians don't merely see a violation of technology transfer protocols, Wheeler finished. They see a species acting against its own self-interest in ways their evolutionary psychology cannot comprehend. It frightens them at a level beneath conscious thought. The mist swirled more intensely, forming new images, ancient star charts and strange geometric patterns. There is more you must understand before today's council session, Wheeler said, voice dropping even lower. What I am about to share violates several Confederation secrecy protocols. But events are accelerating and you must be prepared. Jack straightened, sensing the gravity of the moment. The Confederation is not the first galactic civilization, Valar began. 3 previous ones rose and fell. The official records say they collapsed due to internal conflicts or natural disasters. This is not the complete truth. The mist formed into an image of a massive dark shape moving against a field of stars. Each civilization fell when confronted by something from beyond our galaxy's edge, something ancient and patient that tests emerging civilizations when they reach certain developmental thresholds. Jack felt a chill despite the warm, humid room. Test them how? By presenting challenges that require adaptation and cooperation on scales most species cannot achieve. Valar's eyes seemed to look through Jack. Challenges that cannot be overcome through competition or self-interest alone. The implications were staggering. You're saying there's an intelligence out there that... What? Judges whether galactic civilizations deserve to continue. I am saying, Valar replied carefully, that the universe contains patterns larger than any single species can comprehend. The Morrigan synapse has observed these patterns for millions of years. We believe the current Confederation approaches a critical juncture, one it is ill-equipped to navigate due to its rigid hierarchies and competition-based values. And humans? Jack asked quietly. Your species evolved unusual cooperative tendencies even toward strangers and other species. This makes you uniquely valuable in the coming crisis. Valar's voice took on a new urgency, but it also makes you dangerous to the existing order. Many in the Council would rather remove the human variable than risk the disruption you represent. Jack absorbed this information, mind racing. The emergency session today is not truly about water filters, Valar confirmed. It is about whether humanity will be permitted to continue influencing Confederation affairs. The Rigelian faction hopes to revoke your leadership of the humanitarian initiative and restrict Earth to limited diplomatic contact only. On what grounds? They will claim that human emotion clouds judgment, that your actions demonstrate an inability to follow established protocols. Valar's expression became even more solemn. But their deeper fear, which they themselves may not fully understand, is that your species represents an evolutionary path they rejected long ago, one that prioritizes collective survival over individual or species advantage. Jack stood, pacing the small room. So what do we do? How do I defend Earth's position when the real objection is to our basic nature? Valar rose as well, his small frame suddenly seeming more substantial. You cannot defend against their fear. Instead, you must help them see beyond it. How? The Tau Ceti evacuation data, Valar said. Your team collected information that the Council does not possess, evidence of unusual seismic patterns before the eruptions, patterns that match certain historical records in Morrigan archives. Jack stopped pacing. You think the Tau Ceti disaster wasn't natural? I think, Valar said carefully. It may have been the first move in a very old game. One the Confederation has lost 3 times before. The implications were staggering. Jack checked the time. 30 minutes until the Council session. The Rigelians will never accept this theory, he said. They'll claim we're manufacturing a crisis to justify our violations. Yes, Valar agreed. Unless you can provide evidence so compelling it cannot be dismissed. The kind of evidence we might have collected if we hadn't been so careful to follow Confederation restrictions on scientific investigation. Jack realized with growing frustration. Valar's expression might have been a smile. Precisely why those restrictions exist, perhaps. To keep member species from asking uncomfortable questions. The emergency council session was everything Jack had expected, and worse. The massive chamber hummed with tension, as representatives from hundreds of worlds watched the proceedings with unusual intensity. This was no longer just about Earth and its humanitarian missions. Something larger was unfolding. The evidence is clear, stated the Rigelian representative, his tall, angular form dominating the speaker's platform. Humans consistently violate Confederation protocols while claiming humanitarian necessity. Their emotional decision-making poses an unacceptable risk to galactic stability. Murmurs of agreement rippled through sections of the chamber. At Tau Ceti, they introduced filtration technology to a civilization that should have been allowed to develop solutions independently, the Rigelian continued. This is merely the latest in a pattern of interference disguised as assistance. The council leader's scales shifted through patterns of blue and green. indicating contemplation. Ambassador Reed, how does Earth respond to these accusations? Jack rose from his seat, mind still racing from his conversation with Elder Valor. He needed to address the immediate charges while somehow preparing the council for the much larger threat looming on the horizon. Honored representatives, he began. Earth acknowledges that we provided water filtration systems to the Tau Ceti refugees. We did so because 30 million lives were at immediate risk from waterborne pathogens. The technology we shared was temporary, biodegradable, and designed to be replaced by local solutions within 6 months. He paused, scanning the chamber. What my esteemed colleague from Rigel omits is that without this intervention, the death toll would have reached into the millions before indigenous solutions could be implemented. We chose to save lives now rather than adhere to a protocol that would have resulted in mass suffering. The Rigelian's skin flushed dark with irritation. Emotional appeals do not justify violations of established procedure. The Confederation has maintained stability for 14 millennia by following clear guidelines on species development. Humans have been members for merely 6 months and have broken these guidelines 3 times. Perhaps, came a resonant voice from the upper tier, the guidelines themselves deserve reconsideration. All eyes turned to Elder Valor, who rarely spoke during general sessions. The ancient Morrigan's intervention created immediate silence throughout the chamber. Elder Valar honors us with his wisdom. The council leader acknowledged respectfully. Please continue. The small gray figure of the elder seemed to grow more substantial as he addressed the assembly. The Humanitarian Response Initiative was created precisely because the Council recognized that our traditional, non-interference policies sometimes result in unnecessary suffering. Ambassador Reed's team acted within the spirit of that initiative, if not its exact letter. The Rigelian representative's posture stiffened. With respect, Elder, rules cannot be subject to interpretation based on emotional responses. Either we have principles or we have chaos. A fair point, Valar conceded. But there is something more significant about the Tau Ceti mission that this council should consider. Jack tensed. This was it, Valar gestured. And holographic data appeared above the chamber, complex seismic readings from Tau Ceti's recent volcanic disruptions. The human science team collected this data during their humanitarian operation, Valar explained. They detected unusual patterns in the planet's tectonic activity or patterns that do not correspond to natural geological processes. The council chamber erupted in confused discussions. What are you suggesting, Elder? Asked the council leader, scales now pulsing with rapid patterns of concern. I am suggesting, Valar said carefully, that the Tau Ceti disaster may not have been entirely natural. The seismic signatures match certain historical records in Morrigan archives, records from periods immediately preceding significant galactic events. The Rigelian representative laughed, a harsh, artificial sound. The elder spins tales to distract from human violations. There's no evidence of artificial seismic manipulation on such a scale. Actually, Jack interjected, there is. He nodded to Maria, who transmitted new data to the chamber's display system. The holographic images shifted to show microscopic structures found in rock samples from Tau Ceti. These are molecular machines, Jack explained. Nanoscale devices found embedded in the fault lines where the eruptions began. Our scientists believe they were designed to create precise vibrations that, when synchronized, could trigger massive seismic events. The chamber fell completely silent. This technology is far beyond current Confederation capabilities, Jack continued, and far beyond anything the Tau Cetians could have developed. These devices appear to have been planted deep within the planet's crust thousands of years ago, programmed to activate on a specific timeline. The council leader's scales had darkened to a deep indigo, a sign of serious concern. If what you suggest is true, who created these devices? And to what purpose? Jack glanced at Valar, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Elder Valar has shared certain historical records with Earth, Jack said carefully. Records suggesting that previous galactic civilizations faced similar unexplained disasters before their collapse. We believe the Tau Ceti event may be the first in a new series of such incidents. The Rigelian representative's voice cut through the stunned silence. This is absurd. The human invents invisible enemies to justify their violations of council law. Where is the proof of this alleged ancient threat? The proof, came a new voice, is everywhere you choose not to look. A figure stepped forward from the Tellurian delegation, a tall being with translucent skin and flowing tentacles. Ambassador Lyris of the Tellurian Science Directorate rarely spoke in council sessions. The Tellurian Deep Space Observatory has recorded anomalies at the galaxy's edge for the past 60 cycles, Lyris stated, transmitting new data to the central display. Unusual gravitational fluctuations, quantum-level disturbances in the fabric of spacetime, stars disappearing from our scans without explanation. The Rigelian representative's composure cracked slightly. The Tellurians side with humans now? Has everyone abandoned reason? We side with evidence, Lyris replied calmly. The patterns match those in the Morrigan historical archives exactly. Something approaches our galaxy. Something that has been here before. The council chamber descended into chaos as representatives argued, questioned, and demanded more information. The council leader slammed a massive limb down, restoring order. These allegations are extraordinary, the leader stated. If true, they represent the most significant threat the Confederation has faced in its history. But we require more evidence before taking drastic action. Jack saw his opening. The Humanitarian Response Initiative requests permission to investigate the Tau Ceti incident more thoroughly. We propose a joint mission with Tellurian scientists and Morrigan historians to analyze the nanomachines and search for similar devices on other worlds with unusual seismic activity. The Rigelian representative hissed in frustration. This is a transparent attempt to expand human influence under the guise of an imaginary threat. Elder Vaylor rose again, his ancient voice cutting through the tension. The Morrigan Synapse formally supports the human proposal. We will open our historical archives regarding the previous galactic transitions for the first time in 10,000 cycles. This announcement sent shockwaves through the assembly. The Morrigan archives were legendary for their depth and secrecy. The council leaders' scales shifted rapidly through colors as they processed this unprecedented situation. This matter requires careful consideration. The council will recess for deliberation. As representatives filed out of the chamber, Maria approached Jack with wide eyes. That was intense. Do you think they believed us? Some did, Jack replied quietly. Some didn't, but we've planted the seed. That's what matters for now. Across the chamber, Jack noticed the Rigelian representative in deep conversation with delegates from several other powerful worlds. Their body language suggested anger and conspiracy. We've made powerful enemies today, Jack observed. We already had powerful enemies, Maria countered. Now we might have some powerful friends too. Ambassador Lyris of the Tellurians approached them, translucent skin pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. Ambassador Reed, that was quite the performance. Not a performance, Ambassador. The truth as best we understand it. Lyris tilted her elongated head. Truth is subjective in galactic politics, but data is not. The Tellurian Science Directorate has been tracking these anomalies for decades, yet the Council refused to acknowledge our reports. Your intervention has finally forced the issue into the open. Why help us? Jack asked directly. Lyris's skin rippled with what might have been amusement. The Tellurians evolved in oceanic environments where cooperation meant survival. We recognize kindred spirits in your species despite our obvious differences. And the Rigelians? Evolved as solitary apex predators on a resource-poor world, Lyris explained. Competition and self-preservation drive their every decision. They cannot comprehend your willingness to risk your standing for others. Jack watched as the Rigelian delegation exited the chamber, their rigid postures radiating disapproval. Lyris's large eyes blinked slowly. That, Ambassador Reed, may be the most human statement I've heard yet. Alwa. The observation deck of the Earth Embassy was crowded with representatives from 27 different species, an unprecedented gathering. 6 weeks had passed since the Emergency Council session, and the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Jack stood at the center of the assembly, exhaustion evident in his posture, but determination burning in his eyes. Beside him, Elder Vaylor's small gray form seemed more substantial than usual, as if the gravity of recent events had given him physical weight. The preliminary findings are conclusive, Jack announced, activating the holographic display. 17 worlds showing signs of artificial seismic manipulation, all with the same nanomachines we discovered on Tau Ceti. The assembled representatives murmured in concern as they studied the data. The evidence was now undeniable. Something was systematically destabilizing planets throughout the galaxy. The Morrigan historical records confirm the pattern, Elder Vaylor added, his ancient voice carrying easily despite its softness. Before each previous galactic collapse, similar planetary disruptions occurred, always beginning with worlds near the outer rim, then progressing inward. Ambassador Lyris of the Tellurians gestured with her tentacles. Our deep space observations now show clear evidence of approaching disturbances, spatial anomalies that defy our understanding of physics. Jack nodded. We're calling it the Void Cascade, a progressive breakdown of normal space-time that appears to be advancing toward the populated regions of the galaxy. How long do we have? Asked a representative from the Proxima Collective, their mechanical body emitting concerned clicks and whirs. At current progression, Jack replied grimly, less than 5 years before the first populated systems are affected. Perhaps 30 years until the cascade reaches the galactic core. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. 30 years until the potential end of a civilization that had stood for 14,000 years. The full council still refuses to acknowledge the threat, growled a massive, furry representative from the Deneb system. The Rigelian faction blocks every attempt to place this evidence on the official agenda, which is why we've gathered here, Jack explained. The coalition of concerned species now includes representatives from over 80 worlds. Together we have the resources to act even without official council authorization. You propose to defy the council directly? Asked a crystalline being from Altair. This would violate our most sacred governance principles. What good are governance principles if there's no one left to govern? Countered Ambassador Lyris. The council's refusal to confront this threat amounts to collective suicide. Elder Vaylor raised a thin hand, immediately drawing all attention. In the Morrigan archives, there are fragmentary records of how previous civilizations attempted to counter the Void Cascade. None succeeded fully, but each learned something valuable that was lost when their civilization fell. And you believe we can succeed where they failed? Asked the Proxima representative skeptically. I believe, Vaylor said carefully, that this time we have something they did not. All eyes turned to Jack, who shifted uncomfortably under the scrutiny. Humans are not special, he insisted. We're just stubborn. You are unique, Vaylor corrected gently. In all our records, no species has ever evolved your particular combination of traits. Competitive yet cooperative, individualistic yet willing to sacrifice for strangers, technological yet deeply emotional. The Elder speaks truth, Lyris added. The Tellurian psychologists have studied human behavior extensively. Your species demonstrates a cognitive flexibility that defies evolutionary prediction models. Jack sighed. Whatever unique perspective humans might offer, we'll need far more than that to face what's coming. We need the full council's cooperation and resources. Which brings us to the next phase of our plan, Maria interjected, stepping forward with a data crystal. Operation Revelation. The holographic display shifted to show a massive space station near the galaxy's rim, one of the Confederation's deep space monitoring facilities. 3 days ago, a joint human-Tellurian expedition reached Outpost Omega, Maria explained. Using Morrigan historical data, they located something the original builders had hidden. They're a recording device that's been gathering data for over 50,000 years. The assembled representatives leaned forward in anticipation. The device contains direct observations of the previous 3 void cascades, Maria continued, including detailed analysis of what caused them and what countermeasures were attempted. Excited murmurs filled the room. Most importantly, Jack added, it confirms Elder Vaylor's theory. The void cascade isn't a natural phenomenon, it's a test. A test? Echoed several voices in confusion. An evaluation of civilizations that reach certain technological and social thresholds, Vaylor explained. Created by entities the archives call the precursors, beings that transcended physical form millions of years ago, but continue to monitor galactic development. Jack gestured, and the holographic display changed to show complex mathematical equations. The precursors don't think like we do. They communicate through patterns, mathematical, physical, and evolutionary. The void cascade is their way of determining if a civilization is ready to advance to the next stage of development. And what is this next stage? Asked the Deneb representative skeptically. We don't know exactly, Jack admitted, but the archive suggests it involves transcending our current understanding of physics, biology, and consciousness itself. So these precursors destroy civilizations that fail their test? Demanded the crystalline Altarian, their form flashing with indignation. What gives them that right? Not destruction, Valor corrected. Redirection. Failed civilizations aren't eliminated. They're reset to earlier developmental stages to try different evolutionary paths. Jack nodded. The 3 previous galactic civilizations weren't destroyed. They were rebooted, allowed to develop again along different lines with subtle guidance from the precursors. The implications were staggering. The assembled representatives fell into intense discussions in dozens of languages, their translation devices struggling to keep pace with the emotional exchanges. What does this mean for us? The Proxima representative finally asked, cutting through the chaos. How do we pass this test? Jack exchanged glances with Valor before answering. According to the archives, each test is different, tailored to the specific limitations of the civilization being evaluated. But they all share one characteristic. They require cooperation on a scale the tested civilization has never before achieved. The previous civilizations all failed because they couldn't overcome their internal divisions. In time, Maria explained. They maintained their competitive hierarchies and species distinctions even as the cascade advanced. And you believe we can do better? Asked the Deneb representative. I believe we must try, Jack replied simply. We have an advantage the previous civilizations lacked, Valar added. We have their records. We know what's coming, and we have humanity's unique perspective. Which brings us to why we've gathered you here today, Jack said, straightening his shoulders. In 48 hours we will present our evidence directly to the full council, bypassing the traditional protocols. We need representatives from as many worlds as possible to stand with us. The Rigelians will claim this violates procedure, warned the Altarian. They will, Jack agreed, and they'll be right. But we no longer have the luxury of following procedures that were designed for stability rather than survival. What specifically do you propose? Asked Lyris. Maria activated a new holographic display showing a massive engineering project. Operation Unity. A coordinated effort to create a network of quantum resonators at strategic points throughout the galaxy. These devices would generate a counter-frequency to the void cascade, potentially slowing or redirecting its advance. This would require resources from hundreds of worlds, the Proxima representative observed. Technology sharing on an unprecedented scale. Precisely, Jack confirmed. It would mean dismantling many of the barriers the Confederation has maintained for millennia. Technology restrictions, species development protocols, non-interference directives, all would need to be reconsidered. The Rigelians and their allies will never agree to this, stated the Deneb representative. They might, Jack said quietly, if they understand what's truly at stake. He activated one final holographic display, a simulation showing the complete failure of the void cascade countermeasures. The galaxy didn't disappear in the simulation. Instead, it reset, civilizations reduced to primitive states, advanced species devolving to earlier forms, 14,000 years of progress erased in an evolutionary blink. This isn't about survival versus extinction, Jack explained. It's about whether we advance as a unified galactic community or start over separately. The precursors don't care which path we take. They're playing a game on timescales we can barely comprehend. But I think everyone in this room has a strong preference.